Someone asks you what your childhood was like, and you smile and say it was fine. But fine is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Fine means you can't quite point to one big thing. Fine means it wasn't a movie. There was no single dramatic moment, no obvious villain. Fine means you just got on with it, and somehow that makes it harder to explain, not easier. Because how do you describe growing up feeling 40 years old in a 10-year-old's body? How do you explain that you learned to read the room before you learned to read chapter books? That you knew your parents' mood from the sound of their footsteps on the stairs? That you became fluent in other people's emotions while your own were just sitting in a waiting room with no appointment? Nobody told you to grow up fast. It just happened, quietly, without a ceremony or a warning. And now you're here, technically an adult, and sometimes you catch yourself wondering why rest feels wrong, why being taken care of makes you uncomfortable, why you're always the one holding everything together, but you can't remember the last time someone held something for you. That's not a personality trait, that's a pattern, and it started a long time ago. And here's the thing nobody talks about. It does not have to look like a disaster to count. There's this idea that difficult childhoods come with obvious evidence, visible chaos, a clear before and after, something you could point to and say, that is what happened to me. But a lot of people who grew up too fast do not have that. What they have is quieter. It is being 9 years old and knowing instinctively that tonight is not a good night to ask for anything. It is doing the emotional math before you walk through the front door. It is becoming the calm one, the responsible one, the one who just handles it, not because anyone assigned you the role, but because the role was sitting there and someone had to pick it up. It is being praised for being so mature, so easy, so low maintenance, and not realizing until much later that what they were actually praising was your ability to disappear yourself. None of that is dramatic. None of that would make a compelling episode of anything, but it was still weight, real weight, carried by someone who was still learning how to walk. Psychologists have a name for what happened to you. They call it parentification. And before you dismiss that word because it sounds too serious for what your experience looked like, let me unpack it. Parentification is what happens when a child begins carrying responsibilities that belong to the adults around them. Not always practical ones like cooking or cleaning, though sometimes that too. More often it is emotional, becoming the person your parent vents to, being the one who keeps the peace, sensing when the atmosphere is shifting and quietly stabilizing it before anything breaks. Researchers who have studied this found something that sounds like a compliment but is not. Parentified children develop what looks like exceptional maturity. They are perceptive, emotionally intelligent, incredibly self-sufficient. But it's not maturity, it's a survival adaptation. Maturity develops naturally over time with safety and support. A survival adaptation is what your nervous system builds under pressure because it had no other option. The problem is your nervous system didn't know this was supposed to be temporary. It built these patterns as a permanent structure, a default setting. And default settings don't switch off when the situation changes. They keep running quietly in the background long after the original threat is gone. Because what started as a response became an identity. Every time you sensed tension and moved to neutralize it, that was a line of code. Every time you swallowed your own needs to keep the peace, that was a line of code. Every time you got praised for being so responsible, your brain logged that as information about what makes you safe and valuable in the world. Do that enough times across enough years, and you don't just have a habit, you have an operating system. And operating systems run everything. They're not a feature you can toggle on and off. They're the invisible architecture underneath every decision you make, every relationship you enter, every room you walk into. So now the situation has changed, but the operating system didn't get that memo. It's still scanning every room for tension, still doing emotional math before you speak, still defaulting to your needs coming last. The situation upgraded, the software did not. And here's the part nobody says out loud. The world actually rewards this. You're productive, you're dependable, you don't ask for much, you hold things together without being asked. Workplaces love you, people lean on you constantly, and on the surface it looks like strength, like you have it all figured out. But nobody asks what it cost you to become this way. Nobody sees the invisible tax you're paying every single day just to function at the level everyone else takes for granted. Society collected the benefits of your survival adaptation and never once acknowledged it was an adaptation. It called it your personality. It called it a gift. It never called it what it actually was, which is a child doing an adult's job with a child's resources and no one noticing the weight. That weight shows up in quiet ways. It's the bone-deep tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. It's the control, not the dramatic kind, but the need to manage every variable in your environment because unpredictability once meant everything falling apart. It is the way intimacy feels exposing because letting your guard down was a luxury you couldn't afford back then, and your nervous system has not forgotten that. It is doing the emotional labor in every room you walk into, conducting the atmosphere, diffusing tension before it starts, making everyone comfortable while you're quietly running on empty. And the loneliest part is this: you can be surrounded by people who love you and still feel completely unseen, not because they don't care, but because the version of you they see is the one who handles things, and you've been that version for so long you're not sure who you are underneath it. So what do you do with all of this? First, you let it count. What happened to you doesn't need to look like a disaster to be real. The weight was real, the cost was real, and the child who carried it deserved so much better than having to carry it alone. Grieving that is not self-pity, it's honesty. Second, you start to separate your worth from your usefulness. The reason rest feels wrong is because somewhere along the way, your nervous system learned that your value lived in what you could do for other people. That was never true. It was just the operating system talking. You are allowed to receive without earning it first. You are allowed to need things. You are allowed to be the one who falls apart sometimes and still be loved through it. That child who held everything together did an extraordinary job, but they don't have to run the show anymore. It's safe to put some of it down. It's safe to let someone else hold something for once. And if you're somewhere in the middle of figuring that out, still half running the old software and half trying to rewrite it, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. If this video felt like something you needed to hear, subscribing means more of this finds its way to you. And if someone in your life carries the weight the way you do, send it to them. Sometimes the most powerful thing is just knowing someone else sees it too.